Hi, this is a slide recording for the Mughal Dynasty. So this is part of chapter 21, the Muslim empires, and we'll take a look at India and its unique run as a Muslim empire. So as a reminder, it's part of this group of gunpowder dynasty groups that come to power after the falling apart of the Mongol Khanates. They rise to power through Islamic leaders and also their use of gunpowder weapons. I put together a short summary slide here of just kind of, this is really big picture thinking for history. It's been a while since we've been in the Indian subcontinent. It's been all the way from the classical time period. So if you remember, in the classical time period, we had the Mauryans and the Guptas. The Mauryans were also Hindu until Ashoka, so you might have remembered Ashoka and his conversion to Buddhism. The Mauryans will fall. The Guptas later emerge, and they are the centralizers, and they entrench in India a precedent for regional rule. And if you remember the term Rajput, so these Hindu princes that have regional rule overseen by the Gupta rulers. The Guptas are conquered at the end of the classical time period, and there is a gap there in Indian history without centralization. But after the arrival of Islam and the expansion of these Islamic states in the northern part of India, there is a time, what is called the Delhi Sultanate, where we have Islamic rulers that have essentially a small empire, and they are ruling, again, that northern section of India. They are not ruling the southern part. That is still left under regional rule. They don't really have control over it. However, the Delhi Sultanate, and which is not just a unified group, like there are different groups that take over ruling in that region. However, we're not going to get into all that detail. However, that political structure is finally conquered by Mongol conquest. And then later, after the Mongol Khanates fall apart, there is another wave of invasion led by Timur, and just as brutal, and also removes any power structure there. However, that is short-lived as well. And so after that time period, then you'll notice that's toward the end of Era 3. So as we enter Era 4, this northern section is essentially a group of Islamic warriors and nomadic groups that are vying for power and the desire to centralize northern India. And then the Hindu Rajputs, who are these regional princes that were entrenched in the northern, central, and southern parts of India, that also want to control India. And so really the question is, who can gain control of the north and the south and centralize? There's a map here. This just shows you the darker the area there, that means the land that was controlled by the Delhi Sultanate. And you can see then that the controlled territory there is in the north, which makes sense because it is more accessible and also connected to the Silk Road. So our big questions for India during this time then is, how is it that it becomes a Muslim state? How do the different rulers attempt to unify India? Because that certainly will be tricky as Islamic rulers ruling over a predominantly Hindu population, and especially a Hindu population that is very used to regional and decentralized rule. And we have these regional power bases of the Hindu Rajput princes. And so I think it's just a really interesting question of how does one do that? And we'll see a couple different answers for that. Is unity possible? We will see policies of a couple of rulers of the Mughal dynasty, both Akbar and Aurangzeb, that have very different political consequences. And then as we take a look at India, we want to also back up and take a look at the political and economic context. So when we take a look at state building and the growth of empires during this time, and then also the globalization of trade routes, like how will India compare? Because they're really transforming themselves into a unified state with a different style of rule and these Muslim rulers, but what about Europe, and how will they fit in to this whole globalized network of trade, and how will they compete with other rising states and empires? So the Mughals of India, as you take a look at modern day India, this will actually include what is today modern day Pakistan, and perhaps like a slim portion of Afghanistan. And this region even today, there's skirmishes going on where there's tensions between Muslims and Hindus. So what is unique about the Mughals is that they are Muslim. It's important you understand that the rulers at this time are a unique diversion in India's history. The Mughal dynasty will kind of be the furthest east that Islam will entrench and grow, with the exception of the islands in Southeast Asia. We worked on a graphic organizer in your workbook, pages 80 to 81, and so that slide is in reference to that. A quick look at culture and society. A big topic that comes up on the AP exam from this time period is the blending of many of these cultural elements, and that certainly makes sense. If we have these Islamic rulers that are ruling over Hindu populations, we certainly will see a mixing of people and populations and, of course, ideas. So it is religiously diverse. However, that doesn't mean it's equal. So by that, I mean Hindu will remain predominantly Hindu. That's important for you to understand. Just because they have Muslim rulers does not mean that the majority of people living in India will convert to Islam. Most of them will remain Hindu. The rulers then are Muslim, and that means, like, obviously the Muslim faith is going to grow and flourish under the rule, but again, just remember it doesn't take over as a predominant belief. A unique topic to this time period also is kind of the blending of religious ideas. And so we'll talk about Din-e-Ilahi, which was the idea of Akbar on how to blend together the cultural beliefs of his people, and also the emergence of the Sikh religion, which on a very basic description level is embracing elements of monotheism from Islam and some of the tenets of righteous living and personal responsibility, but then also this expressive form of Hinduism and some of the principles of Hinduism. And so Sikhism then is, on a basic level, a blending of the two. The social classes will stay in shape from the caste system, but of course at the top of that whole social system then will be the Islamic political rulers and the military aristocracy. Patriarchy is misspelled, sorry about that, there should be a H there, but patriarchy will be entrenched and endure in India at this time, as it will through the next time period as well. That we see that the practice of sati, or widow suicide, is still common. The practice of child marriage is still common. And just overall lack of equal status for women living in the Hindu and Muslim societies there. The Mughal Empire, why do we begin to study that then? I mean, that we didn't talk about the Delhi Sultanate, so remember, it's always about the empires that are growing in power and having a great amount of impact on those people around them. So when we take a look at the growth of the Mughal Empire, they're trying to incorporate the lands of the South, because the South, the middle is not necessarily that productive because there is the arid plateau. However, this is vital if they are going to control the trade routes. And of course, it would be beneficial to have the entire subcontinent under control. Also, it's important to remember that these territories to the south have been, by and large, very, very difficult to centralize, even for Hindu rulers. And so it is a challenge for the Mughal rulers. As we go into the different rulers, it's important to understand the unique rulers, what they contributed, and what the outcomes were. So in your note organizer, you wrote down facts about Babur. So he was that warrior, that Turkic warrior from the Pakistan, Afghanistan area. And he is actually traveling into India and uniting the various Islamic groups up there. And he is the conqueror. However, Akbar is more of the person that develops a plan for how do we transition over from conquering and having northern India to how do we actually develop a unified Indian empire. And we know that at first, we know that he was a very successful military commander, led several successful campaigns, but he did not want to rule as an outsider and wanted to unite India. And so he really thinks through these policies. We talked about in class, what do you do as an outside Muslim ruler to have the Rajputs on your side? It's probably strategically impossible to think that you could just literally conquer them. They are too entrenched. They have their regional power bases. They know the land in the south better than you do, and you are outnumbered. So he went with a wiser strategy, more pragmatic, and thought, I'm never going to be able to conquer this alliance of Rajput. So what if I bring them into my system and their success relies on my success? We talked about his policy for religious tolerance, his elimination of the jizya, which was the tax on non-believers, his marriage of people of different faith, women of different faith, and especially within Rajput families. We talked about the promotion of the Rajput princes into the bureaucracy and also the military aristocracy that we saw in India. But also did allow for quite a bit of local rule, so the little stuff could be left at the local level, and even the Rajputs themselves, could have a little bit of say in that. Akbar did try to eliminate sati and purdah, which would be like the veiling, but was not able to make any long-term success in those. So under his rule, like the peace and the tolerance and the unity then, because he was able to bring the Rajputs onto his team then, what we see then is the jumping off point for this unified, expanded, and incredibly wealthy Indian empire. One of the interesting things about Akbar was his true, very open-mindedness to these different religions, allowing Hindu temples to be built. I mean, he's a Muslim, so that's a big deal to say like, yep, that's fine. You go ahead and build your Hindu temples and have your Hindu worship. But he really thought that in the end that India had to find a way to grow together if they were to be truly unified and strong in the long run. And so he attempted to merge all of these ideas from Islam and Hinduism into one religion, Din-i Ilahi. And so this would be an example of cultural blending and cultural syncretism. What we know is that it was not accepted by people. And we could probably see why, like to totally redefine God and to totally redefine spirituality is incredibly hard to do. And especially in India, where Hinduism, you have to think about the unity and the entrenchment of power in the caste system. I mean, people who are in power, they are not going to be willing to give up this position of privilege within the caste system. And then Muslims themselves, who are like, that is the number one pillar of Islam, is that you are monotheistic. So it probably is great in theory, but not very practical solution. After Akbar, then, we have other Mughal rulers, and really their goal is continued expansion and promotion of trade. Shah Jahan was famous. I mean, this was like at the peak of the wealth of India and the Mughal Empire. And so we have great accomplishments in art and architecture and the growth of knowledge. Shah Jahan was known for the palace living and the wealth and his expansion of control over trade and economy. However, it's incredibly expensive living. We also know that, the more you get wealthy, the more you're into palace living, the less you're into military strategy. That is just an inevitable story of empire building. And so Shah Jahan, through, it kind of doesn't matter that he furthered the economic development of India and the infrastructure and the richness of India, made all these trade agreements, because by turning his attention away from military goals of India and military preparation and fully appreciating the arrival of the Europeans and what their presence is going to do, he's really going to put India in a bad position. And then we get Aurangzeb, who of course is going to take a look around and realize how un-Islamic the Mughal dynasty has been. The drinking, the palace living, the lavish lifestyle. And so he begins an attempt at religious purification and eliminating Hindu influences, whether it's Hindu temples or whether it's the position of privilege of the Rajput at the local level. He reinstituted the jizya. I think we already talked about banned the Hindu temple building no military positions, no bureaucratic positions. And so this is a huge change. And it's going to turn the Rajputs against him.